G'day everyone, Prep Aussie here. I hope you're all well in whatever part of the world you're watching this video. Today is the 16th of the 1st, 2018, and the time here is 0700 Australian Eastern Standard Time. Ladies and gentlemen, I have a real treat today. I'm interviewing Bill Holter from JS MINESET. We all know Bill, or you should know Bill. If you watch my shows, you know that I'm a big fan of Bill's and all the work that he does at JS MINESET. This is the link here, or the page that they have, the website. You can go there and watch Bill's and read Bill's summaries on current geopolitical situations, and I'd highly recommend that you do. Bill's one of the preeminent people in that regard, and so is Jim. So g'day Bill, welcome to the Australian audience, mate, and thank you for accepting the invitation to do the interview. Much appreciated.
Thanks for having me on. We're a day behind you here in Texas.
Yeah, I know it's a bit of a hassle working out the times, isn't it, to do these interviews? But never mind, we're there. Okay, folks, just a quick plug. Here's my Patreon page for the, as you all know, I'll put in the Freedom of Information request in regards to the Clinton Foundation, and I'm going to need help to get the paperwork from the government. So please donate if you can. Okay, Bill, let's start off by asking you the obvious questions, and then I'd like to branch out a little bit and go for not so much geopolitical and financial stuff, but more on a personal level.
Sure.
Can you try and explain to people here in Australia? I do it quite often. I actually tell people that, you know, whatever happens in America is going to affect everybody. Could you actually give us a bit of feedback from your side and just let us know what is happening in America geopolitically as regards to the Clintons, the pedophilia? Look, and before you say anything, you know, we're reading about it, we're hearing about it all the time, but as you know, we're a long way removed from America because we're down under.
Right.
So could you just give the Australian viewers your take on exactly what's happening, where it's going, and what it means, or what it's going to mean for America, Australia, and the world?
Okay. Well, first, there's a major divide in the United States. There's a major divide. The rule of law basically had been broken down. As it's turning out, there was all kinds of things that had gone on over the last 8, 10, even 20 years that 50 years ago, people would have immediately been thrown in jail. With the election that Donald Trump won, a lot of things have come to light that would not have come to light. There's all kinds of fraud that's being uncovered, and the heinous crime of massive pedophilia is coming to light. This, had Hillary won the election, none of it would have gone forward. It would have been buried in the courts. So from the standpoint of the truth getting out, I believe, and I've talked about this, is 2017 was the year of the truth bomb, and I have said 2018 is the year that truth will finally matter. Now, as the truth finally matters and people wake up, and I think you'll see financial panic because the world has been living way above their means. I can tell you, in the United States, the amount of debt that the everyday average person has is staggering. The amount of debt that the nation, federal debt, is unpayable. And from what I understand, it's the same thing pretty much throughout the world. I understand it's the same thing down in Australia. Your housing market has just blown up sky high as far as valuation levels. And what happens is when there's fear, and I believe fear is going to come forward or be brought forward by truth. Fear is going to affect the credit markets, and unfortunately, the world is more indebted now than they've ever been, or the world has ever been in the history of history. And a lack of new credit will cause old credit to become, if you want to call it, unfunded. In other words, let's say you have a $1 million house and all of a sudden credit gets shut off. Who are you going to sell that $1 million house to? You can't, because they don't have the ability to purchase it. So it's all going to boil down to, I think globally, it's all going to boil down to a credit implosion based on lack of trust, because the truth has come out showing how, if you want to call it, untrustworthy the system is.
Yeah, I'd probably agree with that. Let me just ask you. I know this is going to sound like a silly question, but I don't think I've heard many people ask you this question. Is there any way out of this? Is there any way that we can, is there any magic bullet? Is there any magic lotion? I don't know. Is there any remedy to stop what's happening now?
The only magic bullet could possibly be, and I mean, you've read it in the Bible, a debt jubilee. The only problem with that is one man's asset is another man's liability. For instance, every currency on the planet is a debt-based currency. It's based on debt. So all assets, pretty much, other than if you want to call it unencumbered silver and gold, pretty much all assets on the planet are based on debt. So if you have a debt jubilee, you also have an asset jubilee. But that would be the only way to wipe the debt out. Now, what I think you're going to see is that currencies are going to hyperinflate all across the world, and debt is going to be wiped out that way.
Well, I can tell you, we've got inflation here already, and it's very, very obvious. And the ironic thing is that it's mainly based on Australian-based products where the inflation is going up. And I'll give you an example. I know this is a silly example, but I'll give you an example. I now can't buy Australian beer. I buy imported beer, because it's if I wanted to buy a carton of beer, of the beer that I normally drink, it's $60. But if I want to buy an imported one, I can actually get 60 cans for $50.
Really?
Yeah, that's how bad it is getting here. And the price of meat has skyrocketed. Homegrown meat, chicken, vegetables aren't too bad at the moment, but I've noticed they're starting to go up, and especially nuts. Nuts have gone through the roof. So the actual inflation is actually creeping in a lot more over the last 12 months, I've noticed.
Yeah, so you're finally getting inflation in goods also. And that's the next step. Like, for instance, here in the US, we have inflation of assets. You look at the stock market, you look at real estate, people consider the market's going up, but truly what it is it's inflation. And we're just starting to begin to see the creep. I mean, we've had inflation all along in goods, but being the reserve currency of the world, we have been insulated from, if you want to call it, consumer goods inflation somewhat.
Yeah, I don't think we're covered anymore, if you know what I mean. I don't think we're going to be able to hide from the inflation. The housing market, as you said, is in some regards it's actually tanked, and in other regards it's just gone through the roof. But the big problem we have here in Australia is the Chinese, and now that the Chinese have been aren't allowed to actually take the money out of the country anymore. Now we've got the apartment problem where they've built, 10 million apartment blocks for the Chinese to buy, and the Chinese aren't buying them anymore. So we're going to have a huge crash here in that market. The Australian...
Right, same thing in Canada. Canada has experienced, like Vancouver, Toronto, they've experienced the same thing.
Yeah, it's very bad here. Actually, it's gonna be a huge problem for Australia in the not too distant future. We're talking months here, really. By the time that they try to actually sell all these units, which are actually just about all going online at the same time.
Right, that was my point. If you own something, who are you going to sell it to?
Yeah,
and especially with China putting more stringent capital controls on.
I just want to ask you, Bill, because this is a big issue down here in Australia. I'm not sure if you know this or not, but I just want to talk about the Clinton Foundation, and I know you're a big fan of the Clinton Foundation, so I don't know whether you know this or not, but it's come to light and it's getting brought out more and more every day. And that's part of the reason why I put the Freedom of Information request into the Australian government. It would appear that Australia has given the Clinton Foundation in the region of up to $500 million. So we're trying to get to the bottom of it here in Australia, but obviously, as you know, they're going to protect their backsides no matter what. So could you give people here in Australia a rundown very briefly of the Clinton Foundation in America and how you perceive as it was and how it's going to end up?
Well, I think some people, including Bill, Hillary, and Chelsea, I think some people are going to go to jail. Your best source on the Clinton Foundation is Charles Ortel. He's, if you want to call him a forensic accountant,
yep.
He's proven point after point after point where money has come from nefarious sources. The money hasn't been used for charitable. I mean, he showed in Haiti where money was earmarked for Haiti and never, very little of it made it to the Haitian people. Yet salaries, bonuses, running the foundation, those expenses were paid for. And don't feel badly about the Australian government, because there's a lot of other governments that were duped into the same thing.
Well,
but when all is said and done, I think there's enough proof out there right now to show that this was a foundation run by the Clintons, for the Clintons, and as a way to launder money and not pay taxes on it.
And a very big pay for play scenario.
Right, exactly.
That's a good question to segue into another one, Bill. How does Bill Holter, this is a big issue down here in Australia with the people who watch my show, as regards to family, etc. How does Bill Holter approach the issues with his own family, inner circle, if you want, as regards to how do you make them understand what's going on, mate? Because the biggest problem we actually have, most of the people have here, obviously, is actually someone may be enlightened and wants to tell their family, and their family thinks they're completely crazy.
Right. Yeah, it's. I have the same problems. I mean, I love my sister dearly, but she thinks I'm a nut job because I have tried to show her 5, 7, 10 different ways with different, all common sense that average normal person should be able to figure out about 9/11, how there's no way that those buildings were brought down by planes.
Yeah, that's part of it.
It's amazing when people get their heels dug in, they won't move. Yeah. And the problem is then you have other topics that because they believe or think that you're a lunatic, they're not going to believe anything that you say because you're a lunatic. No matter how much common sense it makes.
Yep, yep. No, look, I have the same problem, and in actual fact, it's the main reason why I'm actually doing this show is to actually try as much as possible to wake, even if I wake one person up, I reckon I've done my job. But obviously want to wake up as many people as possible. But yeah, look, I have the same issues. My wife thinks that I'm crazy. She laughs about it, but even my children are now starting. My children are actually becoming more enlightened than my wife, which is scary. But everybody has the same problem here in Australia. They're trying to get the word out, but obviously the mainstream media here does nothing to help, the same as in the US. But it's a very big issue because people, as you know, Bill, if people don't understand, then they're not prepared. And the preparation or being prepared is the biggest issue, which leads me into another question for you. How does Bill Holter move on to the next step, and how does he get prepared for what's coming?
I've been asked this before, and I think I've boiled it down to, I think the best way to prepare is to spend a 3-day weekend at your home with no electricity and no running water. And you figure out how to get water and you figure out how to survive over that weekend. And I guarantee you, you will plug a whole bunch of holes in your preparedness.
That sounds like good advice. People having cold showers usually makes them, galvanizes them into the reality of it, I guess.
Right. I mean, when the system goes down, how are you going to know? You got to understand, your utility runs on credit too. So if credit shuts down, how's your utility going to pay for fuel to generate electricity? And it may be on and off, may be spotty. I may be wrong. All the services may continue. In my opinion, when the banking system closes, I think you can pretty much count on the police being unavailable. Now, I don't know what your gun laws are in Australia, but I can tell you here in South Texas, from what I understand, there's more guns per capita in South Texas. I bet you there will be less crime in South Texas when the system goes down.
Well, in some
because people rely on themselves and their own firearms to protect their own.
Yeah. Well, here in Australia, our gun laws are pretty stringent, and thankfully that's kind of a blessing because not many people actually own or have guns because we're not allowed to own them. You can apply for them, of course, but it's a long process, and basically, unless you're Mr. Super Squeaky Clean or a farmer, they won't give them to you. So in that regards, we may be a little bit better off than most countries because we haven't got arms or guns. But that doesn't mean you can't buy a bow or a bow and arrow or a big knife, or there's all these other items that you can have.
Well, Alan, let me point something out. You're talking about person versus person. Now, the Second Amendment to the Constitution was put forth to protect the people, so the people could protect themselves versus a rogue government.
Yep.
So it goes one step further than just protecting yourself versus your neighbor. If you look at the big genocides of the 20th century, they were all against unarmed populations.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's a scary thought as well. But
what's to say your government next year is going to be the same government that you're dealing with this year? That's the point.
Well, I can actually say to you, Bill, it doesn't really matter who's in Parliament here because they're all the same.
Right.
It's exactly like the US now. There's no distinction between either party. They're both just as bad as each other, and they're both as corrupt as each other. Part of the reason why I'm trying to get the word out is to try and change that, and a lot of other people are trying to change that attitude as we speak. I want to ask you, Bill, we've all heard of Trump's latest executive order, and a lot of people don't realise that actually in the US, based on that order, you're under some form of martial law. Do you think that in the very near future, if things come to pass as you, I, and everyone else believes is going to be, that the US military will actually enforce an on-the-ground martial law?
Well, the executive order, you're talking about the one that basically confiscates assets?
Yes, yes.
Okay. I'm not aware of anything where there would be martial law on the ground. As I understand it, that executive order went toward fraud, corruption, and human trafficking. And I'm not a real fan of that because under the Constitution, you should be able to defend yourself. You should be considered innocent until proven guilty. So you should not be stripped of assets. I think what that primarily is trying to do is to prevent people fleeing the country, so they don't have the assets to actually flee the country. But to prevent somebody to using their own assets to protect themselves, I'm not, I don't agree with that. But if it has to be, I guess you could say, caved in and said, so be it. I mean, the human trafficking, the pedophilia, these people should be hung, publicly burned on stakes, whatever you want to call it. But I don't, or I have not read anything that says that the military would push would push into martial law.
I just wanted to ask you, as regards to the paedophilia, is it actually true? Because people actually down here, where I'm like, as an enlightened person myself, and a believer in all this stuff, I still struggle with the whole thing. I just sometimes just can't believe, if I watch SGT
It's beyond
report.
belief. It is beyond belief. There's no question about it. But if you just search through the WikiLeaks, the released emails from John Podesta, and just follow those to where they went, and follow the WikiLeaks dump, and I mean, look at the artwork in Podesta's home. He's got a picture of scarred hands holding up number 14 and a fish. I mean, if you dig this through, and actually, I can tell you, SGT report, Sean at SGT report has done quite a bit on this, and this is factual. This is not made up stuff. And actually, now you're starting to have some actors come out and say that the pedophilia in Hollywood is just unbelievable. Keanu Reeves was talking, I think he just recently came out and said that he went to a director's house or something and actually had two dead babies in the refrigerator. I mean, it's insane. It's beyond belief. But I think there's enough evidence that proves, yeah, there is definitely something really, really wrong. And this is not just a U.S. problem. This is a worldwide problem. I think you see the elite in Europe, same thing.
Even what you just said is hard to believe.
Well, like I said, go to YouTube, to Sean Turnbull's YouTube channel's SGT Report, and he's got probably 20 different videos with more and more and more pieces of proof over the last 6 months to a year.
Yeah, I've watched all of his videos, and like I said to you, it's just, being from Australia and land down under sort of thing, we are struggling with the whole, it's hard to believe that it could have gotten that bad and is that bad. It seems to me that we've all been living in one big lie that we can't.
It's the most heinous crime possible.
Well, look, there's no doubting that. Like you said, if it is true, as a father of 5 kids, I would actually help put the stakes in the ground and tie people to them. It's just crazy. And that's what I'm struggling with it. So a lot of other people must be struggling with it as well. And as you said in a previous interview that I watched, you said, I think it was Sean and SGT report, you said when the perp walks start,
right,
people will not be able to believe it. They'll just be, walking around the streets in a daze, I think.
I think it's going to anger a lot of people, and I think it will break confidence. And like I've said all along, credit is based on confidence. And we've got the biggest credit edifice of all time. So when that comes down, the real economy will basically shut down, because you can't get grain from the field, turn it into a loaf of bread, and that loaf of bread to the market, to your shop, to your store, without using credit 7, 8, 10 different times.
Yeah.
The danger is that credit breaks down because confidence breaks. And I mean, for this to see perp walks and to see very famous people arrested for Satanism, pedophilia, you name it, it will break confidence.
I agree. I just can't see how it can't myself. Working on that scenario, and you just brought up a good point about buying a loaf of bread sort of thing. How should Australians prepare financially, Bill? Because, we're far away removed. And as you said, when I grew up as a kid, there was an analogy used in Australia as regards to American and Australian ties, that if America sneezed, Australia caught a cold. So what's the best financial way for people to get prepared? Myself, for example, I was talking to David, interview last week, and I said, personally, I've tried to shy away from gold. I've just bought a lot of silver chains that we all wear, or, we can keep very easily. I've tried to steer away from gold and anything as regards to gold, only because I just don't see how a person in my realm, I'm talking middle class here, gold won't be that usable, mainly because everyone's going to have silver. So I just figured that silver would be the better way to go. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I've always said silver will spend and gold will carry your wealth to the next system, because gold is so much more valuable than silver. It will carry a larger amount of capital from here to there. Whereas silver, you could spend it for bread, you could spend it for beer, you could spend it for gas, assuming those products are available. I also think it's a good idea to stock back some food. Stock up 6 months or a year's worth of food. You're going to eat it anyway. And if food becomes scarce, you'll have some, and you won't have to listen to your 3-year-old daughter crying, "Daddy, I'm hungry."
Yeah. Well, look, I've prepared like that myself, but obviously it's very hard for some people to prepare like that.
Don't forget water. Water is very important also. You need a way to purify it or boil it or whatever.
Yep, that's a good sound advice there. Thank you very much. What does Bill Holter do with the family members who are going to eventually knock on his door and say, "Oh my God, Bill, you were correct"? So how does Bill Holter deal with that scenario in the real world? Are you preparing for everybody? Are you preparing just for your immediate family? Are you preparing for second cousin twice removed? How are you preparing?
We probably have I don't know, 6 or 8 that can show up at the front door, and yeah, we would take them in and do the best at rationing what we have. I mean, how do you turn a family member away?
Yeah, well, that's what I tell people all the time. People say to me, "Well, how do I prepare for my parents and everything else?" And I said, "Well, you just buy a little bit more. You don't, you know, if
Right.
you're preparing for a year, and I've heard you say this many times, every time you go shopping, just get that one or two items extra. There's
Exactly.
just
Yeah.
don't break the bank, keep it simple, stupid, and ensure that you actually have that little thing in your mind that there is going to be other people. You will have other relatives that are going to need to be looked after because they don't understand now, but they will understand later. And understanding later means that it's too late for them to get things ready.
Right. And it's a lot of people don't want to understand because I mean, what we're talking about, we're talking about basically a breakdown of society for a time. And that is not a pleasant thing to talk about, but it is a reality.
It's a very big reality, Bill, and that's why we're sitting here talking about it and why we watch these shows. And but the real issue is that with so far, if we've got to be honest, between all of us, we're only 1% of the population. So that's the
I
that's the
think
real
it's
issue.
actually larger than that. I think there's probably 10, maybe even 15% of the population here in the U.S. anyway. They do know something is wrong. The majority can't put their finger on what exactly it is, but there's a lot of people, or a growing amount of people now, that understand there is something wrong. This is not the way things were
30
when
years ago.
when we were kids and grew up, and many of the things that are going on today make no sense whatsoever. The lies are too big.
I would love to. That's a good question. Good way for me to ask you this question, actually. On the weekend, the um, DEFCON 1 was promoted or if that's the correct word, brought out by the NRAD, I'm guessing it was, in America,
Right.
in Hawaii. I'll give you an example as to how stupid they think people are in the mainstream media here. Apparently, they've brought somebody out into the media and said, oh, it was somebody pushed the wrong button.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
You'd have to be some sort of fool to actually believe that. I did a video yesterday where I was actually talking to people one-on-one sort of thing, saying, folks, you do realise that is just impossible. It's got a branch chain of about 20 people that it has to go up to, which includes the president, to be able to actually put that out. So
yeah, it's preposterous.
And I said that one of the big things that I mentioned, and maybe you can expand on this a bit, is that the actual truth of the matter is that just proves to you how corrupt the system is in America. To do something like that tells you that it's actually a very big embedded problem in America as to how bad things really are.
Well, it was a false flag. I mean, obviously, the explanation is false. I believe it was a false flag. I believe it was to divert the media's attention, to divert the average person's attention toward that and away from what happened on Friday. And what happened on Friday was one of the 9 or 10,000 sealed indictments at the 94 federal districts. 11 of them were unsealed against a man named Lambert regarding the Uranium One scandal. And that has not made the news. It's not been anywhere. You can't find it, but it is fact. Those 11 indictments were served on Friday, and then immediately afterwards, boom, you had the Hawaiian scare. And it's my belief that that was a false flag. And if it wasn't, it sure was. It sure was pretty good at keeping this indictment or these indictments under wraps.
Well, I can't think of anything more severe myself. Do you think it was a warning to not only the president but to the American people that they still have power, or is there another nefarious reason for it?
Who knows? I mean, you could dream up all kinds of scenarios. It's the only scenario you can't dream up is if some guy pressed the wrong button. That's the only thing that it can't be.
I personally just cannot believe that they think we are that stupid to actually believe that, because it's just mind-boggling. But as I said to people the other day, what did they think? Sergeant Billy Bob came in after lunch one day and said, "Oh, tell you what, I'll just push this button." It just doesn't. It's just ridiculous. I just can't even make sense of it. One final question, Bill.
Sure.
How do you think financially what's coming will affect American relations around the world, and especially here in Australia? Do you think that it's going to cause? I see a lot of the reason I'm asking this question, because I see a lot of geopolitical machinations going on with Russia, China, etc., everybody else. We've recently, I don't know if you're aware of this, but we recently had Russia doing military drills with the Indonesian government, which was kind of a bit of a worry for everyone, and that's never happened before. How do you think when this shock does come to the world, how do you think America's standing in the world is going to be?
Well, the U.S. standing in the world is going to be less than it is or has been in the past. Put bluntly, the U.S., through bullying tactics or whatever you want to call it, have pissed off pretty much every ally that we have. I read an article today, I think it was on Zero Hedge, regarding Australia. How are they going to deal with the U.S. as an ally and also China? And I think it's pretty clear that Australia will turn toward China and away from the U.S. I think the whole world's going to turn away from the U.S. And I think the world is, and you can already see it, the world is beginning to shun the U.S. dollar.
Yeah.
And as a matter of fact, I believe this Thursday or Friday, China is beginning a oil for yuan contract. And that is in direct competition and will break the petrodollar. So we're at the doorstep of some fireworks.
I've read up about it myself, and I'm well versed on it, but I don't think people are paying enough attention to this China petrodollar scenario, because, as you said, when it finally snaps, it's going to cause huge machinations financially around the world, isn't it? The petrodollar.
Oh, because all contracts, yeah, not all contracts, but the majority of trade contracts are in dollars.
Yeah.
So yeah, and it's going to put a whole bunch of things upside down. And I would warn your listeners that we've already seen Saudi Arabia meet with Russia several times. We've seen them meet with China several times. And I'm going to tell you, once they say that they will accept yuan for oil, the petrodollar is over. That will be the final straw.
Did you really think that that's going to happen?
Oh, I think if it doesn't happen, the Saudis are going to be left behind. The Saudis have to do it. It's in their own interest.
Wow. That statement on its own, Bill, tells you just how bad that things are then, really, because I never thought that I'd see the day when the Saudis actually knock back the US dollar in that regard. That would be just a complete break the bank scenario for the world, really, isn't it?
Well, think about Prince Al-Walid, the one who's been put in maximum security prison now because he's not paying $6 billion to get out. He is very Western. I mean, many of his investments are in the West. And a lot of those princes that were arrested were, if you want to call them pro-West or Western sympathizers. It's clear to me that Saudi Arabia is turning east, not west.
Wow. That's a scary thought, just on its own. Bill, we'll leave it there. If anyone wants to contact you, how do they contact you, mate? And how do they go about researching and etc. as regards to yourself?
You can go to www.jsmineset.com. You can contact me via email at bholter@hotmail.com.
Okay, mate. Thank you very much. One final thing. In all my shows, I finish off with the Lord's Prayer, and I hope you don't mind if I do that now.
Not at all. You're a good Christian. We're all brothers.
I'd like to think I am now, Bill. I never used to be. Enlightenment has done a lot for me personally, spiritually. I'm not a very religious man in that regard, as religions as they go, but I have a firm and getting stronger belief in God. And I personally think that if you do not turn to God at the moment, then you are going to be found wanting. It's been proven to me many times over the last 2 years when I started all this that it's going to play spirituality is going to play a very big part in what's coming.
I absolutely agree, and I was remiss in not mentioning that as one of your preparations. Make it right with your God.
Every man should, or every person should, sorry, I shouldn't say man, every person should, but there seems to be a certain aspect of our humanity that's been turned away from God, especially men. I've found that it seems very feminine to say that you respect and love God. It's been astounding what's happened when I've actually started to deliver this prayer, because I believe it's kind of like a gathering Christian prayer if you want, but really when you read the actual words, there's no mention of religion in there. So this prayer is to God, and any person of any religion, in my belief, could say this prayer. That's why I say it. Ladies and gentlemen, the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done in earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever and ever. Amen. Bill,
Amen.
Thank you very much for your time and enlightening people down here in Australia. In the future, I'd love to have you back if you can. If anything breaks in America, I'd love to hear your take on it, and so would the Australian people. So thank you, mate, for being here, and hope to have you back soon.
I'll do it, Alan. God bless.
God bless, mate. Bye-bye.